Welcome to the Power of Your Mind podcast. I'm Victoria Gallagher, your host. Have you been attempting to use law of attraction or hypnosis to attract financial abundance, a soulmate, or career success? Would you like to be happy, motivated, and successful? Have better health, enjoy more fulfilling relationships, overcome struggle, and gain mastery over your life? Then join me on this amazing self-help podcast where you'll unleash the power of your mind. I'll be sharing 20 years of wisdom and techniques of hypnotherapy, law of attraction, visualization, meditation, personal growth, positive affirmations, and other effective methods to help you tap into the great power which resides in your mind and become the best version of yourself. Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 80. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction coach and #1 bestselling author of Practical Law of Attraction, Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps. So be sure to stop by HipTalk.com and sign up for your free self-hypnosis video training course. And for our listeners who found us through the Power of Your Mind podcast, you can get 35% off your first order of hypnosis downloads when you apply the code podcast to your shopping cart. Also, be sure to download our latest HypnoCloud app from the iTunes store. So today I have a very special guest with me, Jimmy Petruzzi. Jimmy Petruzzi is a world-renowned high-performance coach, hypnotherapist, and NLP trainer, award-winning coach, best-selling author, TV presenter, award-winning speaker, developer of cognitive reprocessing, radio broadcaster, and a musician. He has written 3 best-selling books in their category and 11 resource manuals as well. Today, Jimmy is going to share some of his insights about harnessing the power of your mind by creating experiences and hypnosis for behavioral and emotional change. So welcome to the show, Jimmy.
Thank you, and thank you for a wonderful introduction, Tori. It's nice to speak to you again, and I'm looking forward to the show.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's great seeing you and running into you in the UK about a month ago.
Absolutely. The Hypnotherapy conference, it was a fantastic conference. Great speakers, and yourself, you were speaking there and spoke very well. A lot of people spoke very highly of your talk, and it was a privilege to speak in the same environment as people like yourself and many other great speakers too.
Yes, definitely. Well, I definitely feel the same way. You are always coming highly recommended, and you do a lot of you do a lot of speaking all over the place in different conferences, and so you definitely come highly recommended. So thank you so much for blessing us, gracing us with your presence here on Power of Your Mind podcast.
No, thank you, Victoria. I'm looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts, putting some thoughts out there, and absolutely, it's a great opportunity to speak to you again, and hopefully the listeners get some insight into what I do and maybe some learning along the way too.
Yeah, definitely. So let's kind of get into how did you, that list of things that I mentioned, so you're also a musician, you also have written a lot of books, you're, into hypnosis. And so how did you, stumble upon hypnosis? How did you get into doing what you do?
For me, it's been a long time. I would have been in my teenage years, and as a child growing up, I had many limitations, many limiting beliefs, and I had a dream that I would become an international athlete at some point, but I had very severe asthma. I was a late developer, so I was quite small in stature and physically for a child, and it wasn't easy growing up. And I grew up in a very working class environment, and we were as poor as you could be in modern society without being homeless. We really struggled, and my dad got injured at work, my mum was ill, and it meant as a 15-year-old, I would have to go out and work as well in a factory to help out. And as well as doing that, I was at school too. And my school grades really suffered as a result. And I fell into the wrong crowd. But I had talent. I was talented as an athlete. And I sort of decided some of the work I was doing, I'd put some money to one side and hire a coach. And the coach I hired, it was someone who's going to help me with my athletic ability because I was later developing. And he did more than that. He helped me psychologically because he had a background. He'd sort of studied, I think he'd studied different sorts of mental skills, but he certainly had studied things like NLP and hypnosis. And he's got to point him in the direction of learning that. So as a 17-year-old, I started reading books, and I came across a book by, I'm sure the listeners are aware of, Tony Robbins. And I read his book as a 17, 18-year-old, and I started to believe.
The Unlimited Power book?
I'm pretty sure that was the one, yeah. It was one of his first ones anyway. And at that point there, well, he was pretty sure it was his first one. And in a twist of fate, it wasn't long after I'd read the book. He was on tour in Sydney, and he was at the place called the Hordern Pavilion. And I was making my way up in the world, and I was sort of excelling in sport beyond anyone's belief. And it came down to just hard work and believing in myself. And I took the opportunity to go see him at the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney, where I grew up. And for me, I heard what he had to say, and I thought, well, he does similar things in the way he speaks to the coach I was working with. And for me to invest in a coach was like, what are you doing? It's like unheard of. My parents were from really working class environment. They came from a very poor part of, my background is Italian, and a lot of Italians moved abroad for work, Southern Italians anyway. And my parents eventually would end up in Australia. Really working class people, worked in factories, on farms. And so for me to have a coach was like, what in the world is all this about? But, I went to see Tony Robbins at the seminar, and it resonated. I thought, well, Tony Robbins, the way he speaks is quite similar to the coach I had. Now, the coach I had was more around athletics, but he had this sort of background in mental skills. And I thought to myself that so much of what Robbins talked about resonated. And the book for me, and some people love it, some people everyone's got their own, entitled to their own opinion. For me, it really helped a lot, because I thought, well, irrespective of anything else, I thought, well, if he can sort of do what he's done, and maybe there's hope for me, because I really struggled at academia. I wasn't good at school, and that was mainly down to people weren't aware of the struggles we were facing. Financial struggles. We would struggle to put food on the table. And I was working weekends and trying to train, and I had severe asthma, and I'd gone into A&E hospital on a number of occasions with breathing problems, and I was having every week in injection for allergy, because dust and grass were the two main things I was allergic to. Until eventually I'd had enough, because I thought, well, and I'm not advocating anyone stop taking their medication or anything like that. Certainly not. I'm not responsible enough to say that. I'm not a medical person. But for me, I decided I was in A&E one time, struggling to breathe, and I thought, well, my options are give up sport completely and moderate my life, or alternatively, I look for other things. And I looked at things around the mind, and I went to the GP where I would have these dust and grass injections. He said, well, I'm not coming back anymore. And he said, well, what, you're mad, so to speak. And I'm like, well, actually, it's not doing anything for me, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And at that point, I decided I was going to, like I said, I'm not suggesting anyone do what I did. I thought I'm going to focus. And I was at first a little bit apprehensive, and because eventually I would travel the world in pursuit of my dream. And it was always in the back of my mind thinking, what if one day I have like a severe reaction? Because as a child growing up, I was always on medication for asthma. And that's not the only thing for me breaking the belief, but the belief around that I could go on to do the things I wanted to do, so to speak. And one thing I decided to do, whilst I wouldn't recommend anyone do what I did, I decided to sort of focus my mind. And that wasn't down to anything what I saw at the seminar from Robbins or my coach. It was purely my own research into the mind. And I'm not suggesting the mind is a causation or any correlation, but I do think that sometimes that belief because growing up I had sort of this, severe asthma, and I struggled, and I had these limiting beliefs, and I grew up in a poor environment. It really impacted me. Now the focus changed, Victoria. The focus wasn't anymore about what I was afraid of, it was what I thought I could do.
Yeah.
And that's where things changed for me. And we all are on different paths. And that sort of led me on a journey, ironically, into academia. I studied sports performance conditioning at one of the most prestigious universities in the United Kingdom, where I still am now. And I managed to work with a number of sports teams, establishments, and I am still studying now at one of the most prestigious universities part-time. I spent a lifetime of learning about different things, and I've never been bothered about the titles. It doesn't bother me. I don't really care too much about the title. I want to learn what I want to learn. So I've got so many credits in terms of what I've studied, but equally, some people say you're one of the most qualified people in what you do. I don't know, and I don't care. What really matters to me, I've learned what I need to learn. But there's been some very good people in my life that have helped me along the way, as I probably call, maybe not mentors, but certainly trainers. I've sort of learned with some of the best people there is, and I've even been across Arizona a number of occasions to learn. I credit, and the reason why I credit Jeff Zeig at Erickson Foundation is because I would say, from a hypnotic point of view, he's been one of the most influential people in the way I see things from a hypnosis point of view. That's not the only modality I study too, by the way. So I've got quite an eclectic mix of skills. I've studied a lot of mindfulness. I've sort of traveled the world looking for answers and studied different philosophies like Buddhism, and looked at things like CBT and secular mindfulness. And I've got this really eclectic mix, and I still study science now. I'm sort of doing a program and a project for a master's on mindfulness, actually, for neuroscience. So I still study, but I'm also very spiritual too, because I don't think science can explain a lot of things. And so I suppose, cut a long story short, how I went to what I did is that you've got a child at 16, 17 years of age who's got this sort of, who's just coming through. And people say you outgrew the asthma, and I probably did actually, who knows, but equally quite frail, malnourished, really struggling, growing up in a poor family. You don't really give the kid much of a chance to go on at that point. You fall in the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
But I felt that for me, learning about hypnosis was a way to dehypnotize myself.
Yeah.
For many years of saying, you're not good enough. You'll never amount to nothing. Now, the people around me, they did the best they could, what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
But equally in saying that, I'm being truthful and honest, it did affect me.
Yeah.
My confidence as a person, my self-worth, all these sort of things I really struggled. So for me, the biggest thing is building that belief in myself. That what really got me into it. I started to believe I could be and do something. And like you mentioned, I sort of, I'm quite proud of some of my achievements, even though along the way, some of these achievements, people still doubt me. So in a way, they still doubt me now. So I know it's gone off piece a little bit. It gives people a bit of an insight into how I got into and why this is really important to me. I share it.
It's amazing that, at such a young age, you somehow had the insight to look past this prognosis that you were going to have to be on this medication or give up playing sports. And
absolutely. The prognosis wasn't about you're going to be in this medication, in terms of, it was just basically going in there and see if they could do something about it, because I seemed to react around dust and grass for some reason. But equally in saying that, at the time, a long time ago now, I don't know what they do now. They do the same procedures, but the point being, you're right. It was suggested by people, maybe you want to give up playing sport, because if that's exacerbating it and you are competing on grass, it might not be a good idea. So I did think about it, but I had a long and hard conversation to somebody that I confided in and said, what do you think? What do I do? It's not pleasant as a 17-year-old gasping for air and being in hospital thinking, will I make it through the evening? Absolutely. And it wasn't on one occasion. And some people would think, well, you're making it up, you're looking for attention. And that was even said by people. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought, wow, do people really think that way? It was like I knew where I was, and you get a peak flow meter and you barely, can push it past 100. And at that point, I think the worst of it at that point, from an asset point, it was gone. 5, 6, probably about in my teens, I phased off it anyway. But equally, I would have these episodes, and the point being that correlated with everything else. Working in a factory that was dust, and it's not the environment we've got now. It doesn't help the safety regulations we've got these days. Long hours, trying to do school, the stress of not having food. So, yeah, I had to find something.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm a fighter, and people who know me well know I've always been a fighter, a scrapper. I won't go down that easy.
yeah.
And that was it. But you can't do things on your own, Victoria. You need to sometimes find somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do things on your own. Life's not easy in that respect. Sometimes you've got to find the coach, a mentor along the way, because someone who's been there and done that or can share information really helps a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, and I do think though it takes a special kind of person to just be able to I mean, it really takes a special kind of person to be able to push past all of these these suggestions that people are giving you, and to keep pressing on and keep moving toward what it is that you really want to do, even in such a scary situation. I mean, you might have, for all you knew, been dealing with life or death, but somehow
Absolutely.
You knew inside of you that that's just not for me. I'm going to go I'm going to go find my own path and carve out something that's more unique, where most people, I think, would have just settled for that idea and just said, okay, well, I guess that's not for me, and I'll just do something else.
Yeah, I mean, and I did think about that, and certainly in the end that was going to be the case. Got to make a big decision about, do I go into coaching or do I carry on in sport as an athlete for injury?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it meant that it was going to be tough to compete at the level I wanted to. I mean, football, soccer, as it's called in America, was my first choice, but equally I was very talented, so I could turn my attention to almost anything. I could probably have, for example, I could have turned my attention to American football and probably succeeded. That's the way I was. That's not being big-headed. I had talent and ability in that area.
What sport, by the way, did you play?
Well, originally the goal was to sort of excel in football. Although once I hired this coach, I started doing well in track and field and several other sports too, like boxing and many other things. And that was probably detrimental to me, because every sport I turned my attention to, I could do reasonably well, and there was a chance I could go to the highest level. And I think because of that, that probably ended up being detrimental. So in the end, really, it wasn't until I decided, well, do I carry on pursuing this dream? And in my early 20s, I picked up a number of injuries, and one being a back injury. And that was probably through training at the time. That wasn't as sophisticated as now. And I thought, well, at this point, I want to be at the highest level, whatever that is. And maybe I wasn't good enough. I hold my hands up. I don't know. We'll never know. But I turned my attention to coaching. But one thing's for sure, when I turned my attention to coaching, I did end up working at the highest level with the highest level people. So I certainly made the right choice. But, one way to look at things, Victoria, and for the listeners, is that you could be in a field. For example, imagine for a moment a field. You walk outside, or imagine the Arizona desert, or you've got some nice rolling hills in Arizona, or wherever people are listening. There's plenty of lovely countryside in the UK, wherever they are in the world. Imagine sort of some nice rolling countryside. Now, if someone told you, Victoria, in that countryside there's treasure, lost treasure, you can find this treasure. Now, Victoria might go out there to dig, to find the treasure, as most of us would do, excited, thinking, wow, this is wonderful. There's treasure that awaits for me. And you dig away, and you look. But the only issue is that it goes on for miles. So through chance and coincidence, you might find. But what could happen too, that excitement could turn into despair, trepidation, anger, resentment, frustration, and so on and so forth, because you might look for new tools, you might dig deeper, you might then decide, I'll get a tractor. And it's like trying to find a needle in the haystack.
Yes.
You don't have a map. There's not a map. So you need a map. And that's where, for me, the coach comes in to create experiences for people so they can sort of recalibrate their state of mind, go to where they need to go. Because then people start resenting the goal as well. Because you start resenting trying to dig and find this treasure, because you kind of think, well, I've tried this and I've tried that. And then you see someone down the road find it, and the person gets resentful about them because they think, well, why is it so easy for them but not for me? And they resent that person, and then they resent the treasure itself. Well, I don't want the treasure anyway. But that's a bad state to be in, isn't it? Because then you change your vibration alignment, and like a radio frequency, you won't bring, and I know people think it's a bit woo-woo and out there, but think of a radio transmitter or television. You need the right frequency.
Absolutely.
You don't have the frequency, and that's the whole point for me when people talk about state of mind, is getting to that state. For me, going to Tony Robbins was an experience as a 17, and I've been to his seminar since, by the way. I have my Tony Robbins fix every 5 or 6 years, just to go along and sit in the back and see what he does and enjoy the experience. And the key for me is the experience for me. And one of the things that the coach will do for me, probably didn't realize I was doing it at the time, by coaching me, giving me these targets and experiences, I was focusing on my dream. And I moved away from the fear. And I had this moment, this epiphany. I thought, well, there's probably a chance that anything could happen.
Mm-hmm.
You could walk across the street, the asteroid could hit you. No one knows what's going to happen to anybody anyway. And I felt that basically in the end, just that belief you've got is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you really believe something strongly enough, then you start seeing it around you everywhere.
If you find value in this personal growth related material, I strongly recommend that you sign up for your $1 trial to my Personal Growth Club. Just head on over to personalgrowthclub.com and get a whole month of premium Personal Growth Club video training materials, meditations. You also get 6 free hypnosis sessions that are valued at over $174, all for this trial of just $1. Even if you cancel, you can keep the 6 hypnosis sessions. That's my gift to you, and that's how confident I am that you are going to love Personal Growth Club. Go to personalgrowthclub.com and start your $1 1-month trial today.
That sort of makes any sense. And I think for me,
it makes perfect sense. I mean, you're talking to somebody who strongly believes in the law of attraction and magnetism, and and
absolutely
belief.
Absolutely.
Belief
absolutely.
Is everything.
It's huge, and it's huge, and absolutely, people are convinced, or they convince themselves, and they're a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sort of cross the line across mental health. I just want to make a point. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you've got diagnosis, and diagnosis in mental health is really important. Don't get me wrong, people get support, they get help for it, and it's a really important construct. And I'm not certainly in that field to comment on it per se. But one thing I will say, on my knowledge and what I know through my studies, the diagnostic is based on a construct, so to speak. It's based on a construct in the sense that, okay, there's no biological, and if anyone knows any different, please email me. At least on the studies I've done in psychology and neuroscience up to this point, there's no biological indicator. They're just using a diagnostic criteria. If it's America, the DSM, if it's Europe, the ICD-10. And the point being is that, the label's really good because you get help and support and all that sort of stuff. But equally saying that, how do we know what the experience is for an individual? And all of a sudden you tell the person, and let's take depression for example, it's a spectrum. So you've got sub-threshold and you've got treatment resistant and somewhere in between. So someone could be bereaving and be naturally upset about the situation they're in, but equally someone could have a set of genes that are expressed by the environment. It could spark cascade. So there's many pathways to these things, but pretty much it's got the umbrella term. So for me, yeah, I think it's useful to a point as a guide. Yeah, in saying that, we don't want to turn the person into a now in the sense that they become redundant. You're depressed, you're anxious. We want to see the person's experience, because there's been people, for example, who've been given diagnosis of, say, there might be someone who's got schizophrenia who's a university professor, and that's someone who's struggling to go outside. And that obviously, no one's suggesting one does one or the other. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there is a danger to use it as an analogy, just an analogy, that we sort of label ourselves, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
You don't deserve the goal. You don't deserve this. You'll always be this way.
Right.
When equally, if we get up in the morning, and if someone does have a mental health issue, by the way, I always recommend they go see a clinician and get the appropriate help that they need. But the point being, it's being mindful that the label sits on us.
I think I totally agree with you with the labels. Anything ultimately, once we give it a label, now we have attached our own meaning to how that label is supposed to behave, and how that
precisely. And we look at the criteria.
Yes,
we look at the criteria.
Yeah, and we might look it up. We might look up, like, I have this, or yes, I am this, and therefore this is going to be my experience.
Exactly. And on a given day, we look at that, and you can there's 100 different things we could and that's not making light of that. I think certainly I only use it as an analogy in the sense that, yeah, obviously if someone has any problems, I always would suggest they go see a clinician and get the appropriate help that they need.
Yeah.
All I'm saying from my point of view, in my experience in doing the work I do, working with people who've got, anxiety, subclinical anxiety and performance anxiety,
mm-hmm.
I'm always mindful of treating the person as an individual who's experiencing, whose anxiety rather than has anxiety.
Yeah.
It's a process. It's a verb. It's always changing.
Exactly, and it may be different from day to day. Like I may be experiencing anxiety or experiencing depression today, or this hour, or this minute. But
absolutely,
the next minute, if I go ahead and give myself this label, say this is how I'm supposed to feel, and this is what I'm supposed to be experiencing, then I'm kind of like, I'm kind of casting a shadow on the rest of my day, the rest of my week, the rest of my, life, God forbid.
So one being truly holistic, in my point of view, even if someone comes along to me who has anxiety, for example, I always suggest that they go see a medical person. I'm a medical person to rule out. Maybe it could be thyroid. Maybe it could be something else that could be treated. That maybe it could be a clinical issue that I need treatment with. That underlying that is not my remit.
Yeah.
But equally, even if it is, if the person who's treating him says they're okay working with me. So what I'm getting at is about the way I work all my life is I put my cards on the table, my stall out, and I like to work with people.
Yeah.
If I can't help someone, maybe you can. If someone that comes to you for help, you could refer. And I think it's really important that we all work together.
Yeah.
And that's really important. We all collaborate in the sense that we all respect our positions in what we do. And by doing that, I think it's really useful. And to be able to say to a GP, well, this is what I can help with based on my remit. And they do what they need to do, because it's not easy doing things all on our own. It may not be that we can best help that person with what we know. But going back to what we were saying before, the point being belief is huge. And belief being you got fact and opinion. Now, if I said, what's the distance roughly from, say, let's say the distance from Sedona to Phoenix.
It's about 200, 200 miles.
Yeah, so it's 200 miles. Let's say you're in a car and you drove, and you decide I'm going to sort of measure the distance from there, or you're going to look it up on Google, whatever, and it said it was measured at 200 miles by satellite, then that would be as close to fact as one could get.
Yeah.
In the way we measure things. But if you said that was a long way, would that be fact or opinion? Well, that
It's
depends.
opinion. Yeah.
Precisely.
Yes.
It could be a long way for one person, but it might not be that long for somebody else.
Right.
Just like walking across the room is a long way. Well, it could be if someone's got a condition of arthritis, for example, but it might not be for somebody else.
Right.
But it could be a long way if you were trying to cross a bridge high on a skyscraper to get to the other side. But if you were so all these things are meshed in. So we separate things in the sense that our beliefs, the way we appraise situations, what are our thoughts, and how that impacts our behavior, our emotion, our physiology. So we can work on all these levels.
Yeah. Just as a little segue, like what you're talking about. For example, when you're having an argument with somebody and they say, well, you got annoyed, or you were acting this way, or you, whatever, they label how you were being.
Absolutely.
Rather than
Absolutely.
saying, when be very specific about the indisputable fact that a third party could actually see happening, when you raised your voice, or when you said these specific words, or when you,
yes.
The actual event that occurred that's indisputable, then you can actually talk about what happened rather than like when you were being a jerk.
Yes. No, you're right. That's a good point. And the point being is that you think about things from an early age, and what happens as well, sometimes we have this emotional reaction because if, for example, one has heard these things growing up and then they hear it again, they have this sort of bias in the way they see things. Mm-hmm. Now, all things being well, we're all running our own race in life.
Yeah.
But we don't start the race equally. Genetic and environment has a big influence on our well-being and our behavior. And so we're born in different families. We're born in different environments. We've got different genes. And so it isn't a level race in one sense, but what one can do is the best they can, what they have. And we can focus on where we want to go. But equally, it's not always easy when people do say these things. And I'll give you an example. Recently, a while ago, for me, I mentioned earlier, growing up, I grew up in a negative environment. My parents were quite negative towards me and would say a lot of negative things. Now, there was someone who'd asked me, a friend of mine said that their daughter was in a competition as a stylist. Would I enter this competition for her? And at first, I had apprehension because I felt self-conscious in the sense that people look at me and think, well, I've done stuff on TV, I've done stuff in sport, I'm radio broadcasting, present the Prince of the World. But equally in saying that, there's always been a degree of self-consciousness that stems from early on in life, being told you this, you that, and the other. When she said that, at first apprehension, but equally, I thought at a point, well, actually, this experience is going to give me an insight into where I am at the moment. Mm. And I say experiences have a big impact on our reality, but we learn from things too. And at first I thought, well, perhaps she's better off getting somebody else. But then I said, you know what, I'll do it. Yeah. I'll do it. And I entered, and I asked her how she got on. And if memory serves me correct, she either won the final or got very close to winning.
Nice.
Which was great for her. I was really pleased for her because she's a really wonderful girl, and her mum's a fantastic person who I know from a professional point of view. But equally for me, at that point, I thought, okay, it was mixed emotions in the sense that I never set out to prove anything to myself or anybody else. I did it purely on the basis where I wanted to help this person go where they want to go, and they identify something in me. But equally, there's a vulnerability, Victoria. And the vulnerability, I thought, well, when these pictures are put out there and I'm being judged, and the internet can be a cruel place these days, as people are well aware, people comment, and I wondered what my reaction would be. But equally the same, I thought at a point, you know what, I was almost galvanized in the sense that it mattered not.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought,
Are
well,
these the pictures that you have now on your
precisely. And she said
They're
I could have
great.
as a result of doing it. She said I can keep the pics, and the point being is that it's about the intent.
Yeah.
As a coach and therapist, the client, the intent is really important.
Yeah.
But you can have all the intention in the world, like trying to find that treasure, but if you don't have a map, you're not going to get very far. And you have the best tools in the world. So the key for me is getting into a state, a vibrational frequency where you can welcome. So putting the resentment to one side, putting the fear to one side, putting the frustration to one side, putting the blame to one side. So I stopped blaming my parents. I stopped resenting people who I thought had better lives than me, who had Christmas presents and birthdays, which I never had. I stopped resenting people who had nice things when I had an old pair of shoes, underwear to training, and I stopped resenting all that. And I focused on where I wanted to go, and I realized there was a point I had to focus on where I wanted to go in life, and I would sort of take that on my journey along the way. And you mentioned earlier, I'm working in broadcasting, a lifetime of academia studies, and I've carried these principles in all those areas, in the sense that, you know, getting to the intent and being, and we all, I maybe shouldn't speak for all of us, certainly I do, not people I know, we can become observant reactive rather than observant, and be able to be more proactive and sometimes just let things be. Right. This too shall pass. We don't have to change things all the time. Sit with it. So if you're out there digging for your treasure and you're getting frustrated because the person next to you's found theirs, they've found theirs, you start getting resentful, you start thinking, well, maybe this is not for me. Before you put your tools down, get the map.
Get the map.
And you've got that map, but to get to the map, you've got to line yourself back up to that vibrational frequency, because what then happens, you get these object permanence where you might get the goal and think, is that all it is? It's just a means to an end. Yeah. So the key thing is, go to the feeling first to set the frequency and the state. What's it like to win that match? So what I do with my best athletes I work with, what's it like to be a world champion? What's it like to be a professional? Business people, what's it like delivering that presentation? What's the feeling like standing, see, hear, and feel? But the senses will take you so far, but then line yourself up to that energy. People say, what's all this energy stuff? And I always say to them, well, actually, no, you mentioned before about walking into a room where there's been an argument. If you walk into a room there's an argument, you know, even if you've not been in the argument, the energy.
Oh, and absolutely. You can feel it. You can sense it. So one has a choice to regurgitate all that's happening in the past or break free of that. And for me, the test comes where almost immediately, when you line yourself up to a path, you'll get people coming along testing you. You'll get the person saying you'll not do it. On radio, when I hired someone to help me become a broadcaster, I did a short course. She said at the end of it, you're not going to articulate yourself well enough to be on radio. There's no point. I could have given up, Victoria, but I didn't. I found someone who believed in me, who's a famous broadcaster in Australia, who gave me a chance on a show, and we took that show to like the top. And that was a launching pad for me. So someone believed in me, but equally I had to believe in myself to put myself out. Absolutely.
And the same as in writing books. Truth be told, because I'm academic, started late. At about 23, when I first did a course called Sport Performance Conditioning at a university called Loughborough, I didn't even know the alphabet. I didn't know a noun from a verb. And the first book I did was horrendous. But equally, I would educate myself and learn how to do things in that way. And I remember the reviews I got from my first book. They were scathing. There's no mercy in that. People really go at you. They go at you, you know. And I thought I could have easily put the bat and ball away, but I didn't. I said, I'm going to learn from this.
Yes.
I'm going to keep studying. And you're right. I have had 3 bestsellers, and you can see the reviews out there. They've been there for a long time. Resource managers. I write. I have a passion for writing. People see my articles every so often. I do articles and I do dissertations at universities and that sort of stuff, really. And I'm comfortable doing that because you've got to believe. And that's where hypnosis helped me a lot. I say to people, I don't hypnotize, I dehypnotize.
Dehypnotize, yes.
When you're born, it's that wonderful bliss of the baby. If you think of a baby, it's born into this world and it's smiling and laughing. And it's blissful in the sense, but the baby is assertive. If the baby wants milk, it's going to cry. And the baby also doesn't care who holds if it wants to throw up all over the person. It makes no judgment. And for me, people along the way, they're afraid of approaching people. People say to me, well, how do you talk to these people, famous people, when you do press conferences on radio? And I always say, well, I admire people. I have no awe of anyone because there's a point in their life, they were what they were. And all in the end, really, it's the energy that is more important than anything else. I think for me, it's about tuning in. And I spoke to someone recently in an radio interview, and she said to me, and I said, well, people know. So one of the things for the coaches is your intent. Mm-hmm. People eventually will see right through you if the intention isn't there. It's no coincidence some of these coaches have been going on for a long time. It's the intent. People come and go. But for me, it's sort of aligning yourself. Because it's not easy being a coach. It's not easy being a therapist. It's not easy being a speaker. It's not easy doing any of that, in the sense that there's plenty of people who are going to sort of have a better way, a different way. And the further up you get, the more you get that. And you've got to keep focused. And the intent is really important in that map. But equally, what works for one person might not work for somebody else.
Oh, absolutely.
So the map is something that you use to align yourself to be able to find the treasure. Yeah. And obviously when you've got that treasure, you're grateful for having it, because all that you've got now was once something you wanted, and you've got it. But doesn't mean you have to keep it and sit on the laurels. Doesn't mean that an artist does one painting and that's all they ever focus on. 20 years ago, this painting, I've played one good game. You keep doing whatever you feel is right to do, and you've got the long 10-year plan. But 6 months into the plan, if I decide I'm not feeling it, and I decide something else comes up, I'm in that vibrational frequency to sort of go off in that direction. If that makes any sense. And that's not
it absolutely does.
Surrendering. Is saying, well, actually, you know what? I think this is the right thing. Because you see it in professions. People stay in certain jobs. They don't like the job, but they stay in that position. It's not for me to say what they should and shouldn't do. It's not easy. I know people got families, bills. But equally, it's sort of making that bit of time to one side, maybe missing out on a TV program and putting pen to paper, writing the book, or doing a course. People in relationships, they stay in relationships, for example, and what happens is they attract the same type of rate, not just personal, but professional, and generally speaking, the same people in their life again, because they're vibrating at the same level, and they get healed of the wound. They don't fall in love, they fall in trauma. Yeah. They find someone who's vibrating at the same level that they are, and what happens eventually, one will start to vibrate higher or lower, and they go in their own way, and they cling, and they're so busy focusing on that person. 20 years after they've broken up, they're still focusing on that person, done them wrong. But there's an abundance of people out there.
Hello, this is Victoria Gallagher. I hope you're enjoying listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. As a way of thanking you for listening, I'd like to offer you a one-time discount of 35% off your first order at hiptalk.com. Just go to hiptalk.com and enter the code PODCAST in the discount code area in your cart, and you'll receive 35% off your first order. Thank you so much for listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. Exactly. But they're focusing on the resentment and how that made them feel.
Exactly. And that's a great point. There's a guy at a seminar one time that came to my seminar, and he said to me, he told me that he broke up with his relationship, and this was 3 or 4 years after he'd broken up, and she'd obviously clearly moved on for whatever reason. I don't know. What I do know, he, at every opportunity on these seminars running, would sort of bring it up. And I stopped him, Victoria, and I said, okay, what are you wanting with your life?
Yeah. What do you want instead? Because so many people, they focus on what's wrong, what happened that they didn't like, how they're feeling about that, the resentment, the frustration.
Absolutely.
And so you encourage them by asking them.
He had all that, absolutely, based on the experience he had, and she done him wrong, and this happened here, and I said, well, if it's a relationship that you want, now, I'm not suggesting relationship is the be all end all. There's people who are in relationships are lonely than people on their own. It's about finding yourself first. But the point I was making with him was that I said, what sort of person do you want to be with? Is someone who's brightly, bubbly? And I said, why would you want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with you anyway? That's another point for another day. But more to the point, if you want someone who's energetic, bright, bubbly, then you go there first. Stop being a miserable so-and-so, because you want to get to that frequency, if that sort of makes any sense. Like, you want that job, then you've got to go there first. You've got to go to that mindset. If you want to be a world champion, you go to the mindset of the world champion. You start walking, speaking like a world champion. If you want to be a number one best-selling author, then you act like a number one best-selling author. Don't wait for it to happen to do it.
That's
that
so
sort of
true.
Makes any sense.
Oh.
I'm not telling people what they should do with their life. That's right, book to relationship. I'm just sort of giving you an insight into how my method works, and I create experiences for people to access that state.
Now, how do you create these experiences, Jimmy?
Well, an example, for example, let me give you an example, a real life example outside sport, because I know some listeners aren't interested in sport. And I'll give you, because I work a lot outside sport too, but I've been sort of called these sports coach because I succeed a lot in sport. But I do a lot of work outside as well. This woman wanted to present again. She wanted to start delivering presentations. She had very severe anxiety presenting. When I spoke to her, because she's been to see therapists, she's been to see whatever, she's been everywhere. When I spoke to her and she gave me a bit of an idea of what she experienced, she told me that when she was working with offenders in offending institutions, she had a really, really precarious situation where she got locked in a room with a really dangerous person. And she was teaching, and it really startled her. Now that, along with, this is what she told me, she's in a very challenging relationship with the person that she was with as well. So there's no let up. The work was really stressful. She worked with offenders. Then she would go home and be in what she told me, an abusive relationship. And eventually she had this situation at work where she delivered a lesson and she got attacked, I believe. But anyway, long story short, she wanted to start presenting again. But every time she thought about presenting, she felt really, really, she just couldn't get up and deliver it. So she'd done like the didactic stuff, people tell her stuff and this, that, and the other. And the issue, people, they've heard it all before anyway. So I suggested, I did an experience for her. I said, join the martial arts club. And she goes, why on earth would I want to do that for? Not to beat up people who attacked her. I said, because for me, it's extending the comfort zone. To be around men who've got self-control. If you're not comfortable in the martial arts club, then don't stay. But if you can start to build that belief again, that there are men with self-control, go step by step. And she went to the martial arts club and she really enjoyed it. And she was around men who got a high degree of self-control. And she started to build that belief again that not all men are like the experience she had in that offending institution. And she peeled away at that schema, if we want to call it that. And basically from there I said, well, join a speaking club and speak about something you're passionate about. And she did that. And this is creating experiences for her.
Yeah.
And all along the way, we extend the comfort zone. So the experience you create for people is, the way I do it, is it's not sink or swim, it's extending the comfort zone. as much as they can tolerate, as closest to the outcome they can. If I said to her, first of all, go speak at a speaking club, it would have been a bridge too far, I think.
Right.
So I said, join martial arts, get the belief back, because you've got to identify what the problem is. So I gave her a map, what the outcome is. Long story short, she started speaking again, and she's been speaking ever since. So she got her confidence back. Now, I don't do the work, I facilitate the map. I don't do any of the work. That's one example. Another example is a young girl who had severe anxiety. She had been literally housebound for 4 years. She came to see me to do some work with me. And I said to her, are you getting any treatment? She was getting treatment. I phoned a clinician. I said, is it okay for her to work with me? Now, the clinician said, well, if she does, we have a health service in the UK. It might mean that she can't treat her no more. So I had to tell her, I said, look, if you come work with me, this could be a problem. And she said, well, Jim, you know, I've been in the system for like a few years now. I'm not really getting anywhere, so I want to try something different. I said, okay, as long as you understand, your parents understand, let's give it a shot. So I created experiences for her. And I took her to the local park, and I would walk with her. I'd set targets, how fast she could sort of walk. Because she also had another condition called fibromyalgia. And I'm a medical person. I wasn't treating that, but she was seeing someone for that anyway. So me being sports science too, I thought physiologically, I put a heart rate monitor. I said, if your heart goes over a certain level, then we'll sit down. So I thought we could build some belief, because she didn't know what to do, because some people were saying rest, some people were saying train. She was seeing a really well-established person in that area too, by the way. But to create the experience for her, the goal for me was help with anxiety. That was the main aim. And I said to her, the experience I gave her was there was a wedding coming up that she wasn't sure about going to. And I sort of gave her some techniques she could use to go. And I said, if you go there, because I believe if she could do and get through that, it would build a massive belief in her mind. Not long after that, same again, through experiences that change with realities. Now she's got a business, partner, house. The parents come to all my events, and she follows me on social media and speaks very highly of me. And her clinician, by the way, I respect him because he had his secretary write to me, say, what did I do? And I said, listen, I don't hold anything back. You know what I did. I'm happy to share. But they didn't follow up. So it's experiences, and I suppose one way to sort of describe it is like and I describe a lot of seminars, it's like, have you ever seen the film Christmas Carol?
Yes.
Okay, so you see the guy Scrooge in Christmas Carol. If you look at his life, there's a point in his life where he's in this relationship when he's younger, and he breaks up the engagement. And this is cutting a long story short. You see, he then immerses himself in work, and he finds controlling work. He finds he can moderate that. He experiences success in that. He can control that. And he decides to become this sort of character. It's a safety behavior. And really deep down inside, Victoria, he wants to be around people, but the reality is he's afraid of being around people. So exactly. He immerses himself in work and he pushes everybody away. But deep down inside, he isn't really the character he portrays. It's a defense strategy. But equally, hypnosis for me is a bit like the film, because you got the ghost of the present, the past, the future. And it's a way for him to sort of recalibrate his life. And if you look at it, what happens, he goes into the past, he sees what happens, he looks in the future. But the only way to change anything is to bring the problems in the now. So what happens literally overnight is a change of identity. So whether he really was visited by ghosts or not was a dream, no one really knows. But it didn't really matter, because what happens is in the experience, his identity changes, Victoria. And if one changes, how we define who we are impacts our behavior. So all of a sudden, this label, Scrooge, is gone. He peels away at the onion, so to speak, and he goes back to the core. And he changes. And it's through that experience that he has this transformation. So for me, it's a bit like saying to the person, they know eating a certain type of food is not good for them. They know smoking is not good for them. They know doing one thing or the other. But if you create an experience for someone, so the example I used was in football when I was working with this young lad who is quite a troublesome teenager, and no one could get through to him. And one time what I did is I created an experience for him because he was always causing issues at the club that he was at. And one time I took him out and I took him to a car forecourt and I said to him, you know what, you can have one of those brand new sports cars. He was a very material person, not that I am, but I thought one way to connect to his reality, I said, you can have one of those. You get your head down. I create an idea and association of behavior. And I'm not saying he succeeded because I did that, but what that did demonstrate is it changes reality. Get this realization. The seed was planted in his head. If I just put my head down, I can fulfill my potential. And he did go on to be and play at the very highest level. And one time I saw him at a game and he shouted at me, called me over, and you know, he's still same in similar ways, but he pointed to that sort of story. It was really, really nice of him to sort of say, you know what, that really made a difference to me. So experiences change people. You know, the parent's not going to tell the child, if a parent has a teenager and the child's smoking, because the child sees their cool uncle who's smoking, so they see the uncle, they have an idea, smoking is cool, then have a behavior. If the parent says don't smoke is bad for you, they're hardly going to say, gee, mum or dad, that's great news. Thanks for telling me the error of my ways and put the cigarette away. But if you create an experience for the person, I'm not saying that parents should do this, I'm just giving an example. If they went to an emphysema ward and saw the effects of it, it might have a new idea, new association, new behavior. Now, I'm not just they do that. That's sort of to illustrate. Experiences have a big impact on people.
Absolutely.
And from a psychosocial point of view, that's where I come in. And you've got to be creative. It's not by the book per se, but there is a method in the madness. And I don't have a lot of time to go into it now because I've gone on for long enough. But people can email me and I'll send them the book and they can read. I'm saying they go away and do the things the way I do, but for me, that's the way I work, and it creates experiences for people. And I think that's a great way to have a shift of identity, because there's plenty of books out there you can read. There's self-help books. There's plenty of literature out there. Plenty of coaches, they follow these sort of didactic models, step 1, step 2. Mm-hmm. But you've got trillion cells and you've got 84 billion neurons.
Yeah.
And as a coach and as a therapist, you got to find the way in to the primal parts of the brain, the limbic part of the brain, which has a massive influence on the way we behave.
It makes so much sense. And I absolutely love the metaphor and the analogy of looking at, the ghost from Christmas past and the ghost of the future ultimately, because ultimately all of who we are and our belief system, it really does come down to the experiences that we've had. We didn't really get the learnings because our teachers or our parents or our friends said, oh, you gotta, we can get some beliefs that way, but our beliefs are really ingrained in us from our experiences. And so it just really makes so much sense that really you've got to get in touch with the experiences that you've maybe had, but more importantly, you got to get in touch with the experiences that you want. And you also talk about, kind of taking some like measurable small baby steps to, that walk you through a path to ultimately creating the new experiences and the new beliefs that you want in order to create, that change.
And be really observant that you don't become reactive.
Yes.
In the sense that one reacts to situations in the way that people get caught up in, and they start regurgitating behaviors. Because a person could leave one relationship and bring the same person to the next one, and to the next one, or to the next job, and they sort of regurgitate. Yeah. At no point do they stop and think, well, actually, I have.
It's like taking the same software that has a bug in it or a virus in it, and taking it off one computer and putting it on a new computer. Absolutely. It's still got the same virus. And it's still
Absolutely.
going to work the same way,
Precisely.
whether it's in this computer, it's in that computer. It's still going to work the same way, whether you're in this job or that job. It's still going to work the same way, whether you're in this relationship or that relationship. The experience is it has to play out the same way.
Precisely. And the wonderful thing for me is meditation. Meditation helps to synchronize and to give the brain a rest and the body a rest and sort of recalibrate. Because what happens to a lot of people is they sort of go to the seminar, they read the book, they get all like pumped up and ready for action type thing. And almost immediately there's a test. There's someone that comes along and something happens that doesn't go their way. And it goes back to the analogy where they're sort of trying to dig for that treasure and they start getting frustrated and they start regurgitating. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe it'll never happen for me. At that point, that's when you've got to recalibrate. What I do a lot with my clients, I do myself too, as well. I'll go for a walk around some nice countryside. I'll go to the beach. I'll sort of do an experience for myself. I can just clear my mind. I'll have an hour where I'll just have nothing invade my senses. Just purely just recalibrate and just replenish myself and sort of be in the now and appreciate life for what it is. Mm-hmm. If you can't appreciate now, nothing that comes your way, and you can anyway. The key for me is to be able to sort of surrender to the moment and trust in the universe. I know a lot of people kind of think, well, there's universe and stuff. That works for me. Whether it works for other people, it's entirely. I trust in the universe. I think there's things that they're hard to explain. And no one really knows where our thoughts come from. No one really knows. So many things that are unanswered questions. But for me, it's really important to find a way to raise our vibration back. So in the space of a day, I could be driving and someone would cut me up on the road. And someone could say something. Someone could write something on the internet. Someone could do this. And the computer could crash. And if I'm sort of getting caught up in all that, Victoria, then I'm not experiencing it. And sometimes you need to break that pattern. Find a way to break that pattern. Go for a walk. Go meet a friend. Meditate. And just break that pattern and just come back. And maybe someone fails an exam or they don't pass a dissertation or they've been told they're losing their job or they might be struggling for money. The moment you start focusing on that is when you get caught up in that. I've been through some really precarious situations in my life with money and situations, and I've always held firm. I've always had, there's been times in the early days where whatever little bit of money I was making, I'd invest in learning. I'd go to a seminar. I'd travel. I just had faith that from somewhere, as long as I felt I was doing the right thing, had the right intention, things will look after themselves. Even in the beginning when I was really struggling and I was working in an environment where through business, I got a bit of a raw deal in an organization I was doing some work with and I was struggling. But even then, I was working with some high-profile athletes and it was quite ironic because I wasn't paid this money I was owed from the last work I was doing, and I was young and I'd invested some money in education and traveling, and I was running low, and this person gave me a job to work with some high-profile athletes, and I had to go in the morning with next to no money, struggling and to survive and living wherever I could, and I had to go in there for brave face and smile and motivate these sort of high-profile athletes and the best footballers. And I thought, as long as I can sort of get up in the morning and give it my best shot, things will look after themselves. And the irony was, the big test for me was back in the day, when I still had checks. The person I was working with gave me a check, and he forgot to sign a damn thing. I put it in my bank account, and it bounced, and I thought, oh no, what do I do now? I was really struggling. And the irony was, I sort of sat back and saw it as a test of my strength. And I thought, if I can get through that, then I can get through whatever I need to get through, And that's the important thing. Don't wait until you got that money. Don't wait until you got the partner. Don't wait to get your job. Go to that place. And I'm not saying Pollyanna, happy, wonderful, life's wonderful. I'm just saying go to that place, that state. Whether you want to call it the vibration, you call it the state, whatever frame you're going to use is entitled to you. But go to that sort of place where you're most resourceful first.
Yes. You have to go there first. You have to bring yourself to the experience that you want in reality. You've got to create
Absolutely.
the experience gets created twice. It gets experienced first in yourself and then
Everything was
in
once
reality.
a vision.
Yeah.
You know, what the mobile phones, the technology we're speaking about now, reality distortion field. That at one point that would have been someone's imagination. And if you told someone maybe 30 years ago you could send a text across the other side of the world,
No one would have
think,
believed
what?
it.
Precisely. So who knows what's possible? And for me, it's breaking new boundaries. It's sort of going forward. And I guess, it's a little bit like, say, in sport, if you're taking a penalty in football and you're focusing on the crowd and the pressure, the expectation. Or, for example, you've got a quarterback in American football. If he or she's focusing on the expectation, on the person running towards them, on everything that's going on in the field, if they're not focusing where they want the ball to go, it's not going to get there. They need to hold firm and set their nervous system, focus on where they want the ball to go. If it's a quarterback and they're passing, not that I'm expert in American football, I'm using that analogy because we've got an American audience here as well. So if you've got to focus where you want the ball to go, or the goal kick, you've got to focus on that. You can't focus on the crowd. You can't focus on what if we lose. You can't focus on the pressure or the training you've done. You've got to go to process. So you've got to have faith to go to process. And some days it doesn't work out. It's beyond your control. The referee gives you a bad decision, not good enough, you hold your hands up. But then you go back to the drawing board and you learn. It just might not meant to be. Sometimes you've got to appreciate life. You don't get what you want, and it's a blessing.
Yeah, it's so true. It's absolutely true. And so many times when we don't get something that we want, it ends up working out that we get what we need.
And you've got to have that faith that things will work out for us.
Yeah.
Because who knows what life's about anyway in the end. Precisely. It's just one of them. It's just like life is whatever meaning you give it. And I think being existential is quite useful too, and creating meaning in life. I had this conversation with somebody last night at a seminar, and we sort of got talking, and they were going through a challenging situation. I said, well, not to undermine the situation, but equally, all things said and done, you back yourself. Now, I wouldn't say that lightly, but based on the situation he was going through, he'd been through a lot more challenging than that. I said, well, you've got through other stuff in the past that makes this look like and it's just giving that lift, that boost to say, you know what, actually, let's bring it on,
Yeah.
Let's give it a good shot. And that's sort of, basically, I think we've probably gone over time, but as always, it's great to speak to you.
Definitely. You too. This has been very enlightening. Definitely went in a different direction than I was thinking it was going to go, but it's even better. And that's just one of those experiences where sometimes things change directions, and the directions always work out sometimes in your favor when you just go with it. And so it's really been a pleasure and a privilege having you on. I want to give the audience some ways to continue the process with you, so they can find you on your Facebook page, the NLP training courses. And they can also find you on LinkedIn, Jimmy Petruzzi. They can also find all your books on Amazon by just looking up Jimmy Petruzzi. And then you're also offering you also have a podcast on iTunes.
Yeah, iTunes, I do music and hypnosis audios, absolutely.
You have music and your hypnosis audios on iTunes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
absolutely,
awesome.
Yeah.
And then you're also giving a free ebook. All they need to do is just reach out to you by email or on your Facebook page. And what's that called?
The book is called Change Your Life with NLP, and it's a really good book. And it came from a place in here when I wrote that book, because I sort of got back into writing again. It really meant a lot to me writing that book, and it's got a lot of good reviews, and in this category got to #1 as well. And I think for me that where I sort of rediscovered myself again in the process of writing that book, and it really came from a place from within. And since then I've kicked on and written a number of other books as well. But hopefully people can read that and enjoy it. And if they want to ask me any questions about anything that they would want us to cover this evening that they felt that we haven't covered, do email me. I'm more than happy to sort of to point them in whichever direction. So
yeah, absolutely. And all these links will be in the show notes. So if anybody's listening, you can just actually go into the show notes and click on any of these links to get more information.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Victoria. I really enjoyed the show, and thanks to all the guests for watching. And do feel free to get in touch if there's any information that you'd like to know. But it's been fantastic and great to speak to you again. And no doubt we'll sort of bump into each other in forthcoming seminars.
Most definitely. Absolutely, well, the pleasure was definitely all mine. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Victoria.
And thank you for listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. And once again, be sure to subscribe to the Power of Your Mind podcast if not already. We can be found as Hip Talk on all our social media accounts. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and sign up for your free self-hypnosis video training course at hiptalk.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Power of Your Mind podcast, and you'll be instantly notified the moment the next podcast becomes available. Also, please be sure to leave a rating and a review to tell us how you're enjoying these episodes, and that way you're making a contribution toward others getting to share in this valuable information. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast, brought to you by HipTalk.com, Personal Growth Club, and HypnoCloud apps available at iTunes.